Okay, thanks, Deputy Murphy. Minister, without a shadow of a doubt, the most high-profile redundancy that took place during the COVID-19 period, to which this redundancy payments bill is a response, was the Debenhams redundancy. And what I want to ask is why this bill does not involve trying to do something to compensate the Debenhams workers for the failure, the inadequacy of legislation to protect against the sort of strategic liquidation that Debenhams engaged in, with devastating consequences for the Debenhams workers. I met with the Debenhams workers yesterday, and it was interesting just to refresh my own memory of the circumstances. But I would like to hear, and I think they would like to hear, where is the response of the government to what happened to them in terms of changing the law around redundancies to prevent that kind of strategic liquidation where workers are denied the redundancy entitlements that they should have got. Of course, you will remember that they had an agreement for 2 weeks plus 2 weeks for each year of service, which they did not get. 2 weeks statutory plus 2 weeks, which they did not get. And they fought an incredible more than a year on the picket lines, women who, as they reminded me yesterday, had never been on a picket in their lives. Never. More than a year, from early morning till late at night, sometimes literally round the clock, in a loading bay in the back of the Oireachtas Centre in the case of the Henry Street, and across Debenhams stores across the country, more than 1,000 women forced to engage in that. Because the law allowed, and this, I do have some questions in this regard, and they have questions. As I understand it, and as they understand it, when you are made redundant, there is supposed to be a staged process of notice, which I think runs from about somewhere between 30 and 90 days, depending on the particular situation, none of which happened in the case of Debenhams. They received in early April an email from the CEO of Debenhams where he informed them that they should ignore media speculations about possible redundancies, that they shouldn't worry, that there was no problem, that their jobs were safe, and then 1 week later the very same CEO sent an email saying, "You're gone. Your jobs are gone," and they never heard from the company again. Now, one question they have, and this isn't a sort of an allegation or anything, but they want to know factually, as they understand it, the Department of Trade and Enterprise has to be notified about such large collective redundancies. So I would like, and I know you mightn't be able to answer it here, but they would like an answer as to when, during that period, you were first notified, and what was the response of the government. And they would very much appreciate, and I think they are owed, an answer as to that question. But furthermore, how was it that Debenhams could do that when there was a statutory process around this, which seemed to be utterly disregarded? I am, because it's a redundancy payments bill, and so it relates to COVID redundancies. This was a COVID redundancy where people lost their jobs during the middle of the emergency. And the workers lost everything. They didn't get any of their entitlements. And I'm asking, does this bill address that? That's the question. Does that bill? And if not, why not? And I think the Minister needs to understand what happened and needs to tell us what he knows, because we can't prevent this from happening again unless we get answers to these questions. And so there is a legislative response, and indeed so we might have the opportunity to put in amendments at the next stage which might address the deficiencies, if there are such, and it would seem to me there are, in terms of addressing what happened in Debenhams. The other question is, how in this circumstance could a company that goes into liquidation then move €50 million out of Debenhams' online business, Debenhams.ie, which is clearly part of the Debenhams consortium and which is directly linked to the stores and so on? How were they able to move €50 million out? And what is it about the law that would allow that to happen? How can that happen? And what are we going to do to stop it happening, so that the just redundancy entitlement that those workers should have had is not stolen away from them with essentially accountancy tricks by the company moving assets which should be available for the payment of the just redundancy that those workers are entitled to? How and what are we going to do about the fact that Debenhams consortium were able to load the Irish company with a whole series of debts that it did not have, but which were debts properly belonging to the British company, but they load those debts on to further, if you like, remove assets that might have been available to pay the redundancy for the workers? If these sort of loopholes that can be exploited, and the sharp practice that follows from it from companies in order to avoid paying workers their just entitlement, and remember all that value that Debenhams.ie built up, all those assets were essentially assets that were created through the labour, the hard work, just the decency as good workers who were loved by the customers of Debenhams, all of that goodwill, if you like, that Debenhams had that gave it its value, robbed from them through accountancy tricks. What are we doing to prevent that happening so that workers get their just redundancy, and indeed so the state itself and the taxpayer is not on the hook for the sharp practice of companies engaging in what clearly looks like, and is in my doubt, and certainly is from the point of view of the workers, a strategic liquidation. Lastly, Minister, an invite to you from the workers. They are making a documentary about this historic struggle by women workers, which I think has inspired workers the length and breadth of the country about their determination to fight the injustice they face, and they're asking that you might participate in that documentary that they're making. So maybe you might consider that. I think they'll probably send you a written invite to participate in that, because everybody at the time accepted, government and opposition accepted, there was a great wrong done. But the case that was always made by the government is our hands are tied because the law is the law. So I ask, what are we going to do to ensure that this never happens again, and that workers robbed of their redundancy entitlements actually will have them guaranteed, and that we will have the laws in place to prevent the sort of absolutely appalling, disgusting behaviour that Debenhams engaged in, that can never happen again. So I will be keen, but more importantly, the Debenhams workers will be very keen to hear what your response is to those points.
Thank you, Deputy Boyd Barrett.